Hey everyone, David here, and I've got some exciting news to share. I've decided to write a book, and I've entitled it Psychosocial Hazards Are Real. The book is intended to help clarify the fact that psychological safety cannot be achieved without paying attention to the psychosocial hazards people are being exposed to. Despite how much individuals might be interested in treating others with kindness, dignity, and respect, many cultures are so full of psychosocial traps that no psychological health and safety effort can ultimately succeed. But to address psychosocial hazards, you first have to know what they are, and you have to have some idea what to do to address them. Though the book won't be 100% complete until the spring of 2025, I'd like to share a unique opportunity to reserve a copy during the book presale campaign. The campaign will run from September 16th to October 18th, 2024. This will be an opportunity to get one of the first copies of the book, tickets to the book launch event, and other opportunities to learn more about psychosocial hazards. For more information, you can go to my personal LinkedIn or Facebook page, or the LinkedIn, Facebook, or webpage for ID2 Solutions. Don't miss out on this unique opportunity. Now, back to this episode of the podcast. Since psychosocial hazards affect people differently, it is crucial to have multiple, diverse voices involved in crafting a psychologically healthy and safe culture. To achieve this goal, some organizations will require relearning their leadership practices. We'll discuss the importance of inclusive leadership up next on this episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. As workplace mental health has become a global priority, there's a greater focus on addressing psychosocial hazards. Each week, we look at psychological safety from an occupational health and safety perspective. Let's talk psychological health and safety. Welcome to this week's Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Each week, we seek to increase awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experiences, research, and expertise of our guests, as well as advocating strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. So, inclusive leadership is a management style that values and includes diverse perspectives and backgrounds in the workplace. It involves recognizing and appreciating differences in team members, such as those related to culture, gender, age, sexual orientation, racial identity, whatever it might be. Inclusive leaders aim to create a safe environment where people feel comfortable speaking up and contributing where they can, and doing so in such a way that they can handle situations in their own way. They seek to foster diverse teams and empower everyone to do their best. This episode is a conversation about inclusive leadership, which for some people is not necessarily second nature because they've been born in systems that uh, kind of encourage them to be the tough, quote unquote, tough, strong leader and not look for input. But we're finding that the world is changing, people are changing, their views of leadership are changing, and I'm really lucky to have someone to help walk us through that conversation about inclusive leadership. So we're going to start the conversation, as I so often do, with an introduction of my guest by my guest with this question: Who is Michelle Beauchamp?
All right. Thank you so much. What a great introduction. I love all your definitions. I love you. Thank you for having me on today. Who am I? That's a big question to ask. I like to consider myself an energy giver. I love to consider myself as looking at the possibilities. I have a vision board, and one of the things on my vision board is a glass of lemonade and lemon. And so what I like to do is, you know what, turn those lemons into lemonade. So that's how I like to look at it. The positive thinker, the person who sees the glasses half full, right? And finds a way. That's another thing that's on my vision board is find a way. Like, this seems like this is complicated. I'm not sure how to figure this out. Well, you know what? We can find a way. So that's why my company's called the Champ Group, and you did such a great job pronouncing my last name. It gets pronounced lots of different ways, but you did a great job doing it. And I have my company. What I focus on is helping leaders build their people skills. And so you're so right. It all has to do with helping people feel included. And so that, that's what I am, what I do, and who I am is that energy giver who I believes in people. And I say that I like to help people unleash their inner champ. Right, because we have it inside of us. So I like to be able to help people grow and you know what? Understand what their passion and abilities and their superpowers are, and to be able to use those in the way that they want to use that will impact others in the way that they want to impact others.
Absolutely. Well, we're gonna dig into some of those strategies and conversations. One more before we do, though. One more rather standard question I ask people. So, what does psychological health and safety mean to you? Just off the top of your head, what does that mean to you?
Oh, yeah, you know what? It means a lot. I, have studied a lot under Tim Clark, Dr. Tim Clark. Yeah, I've really delved into that. So and I was really happy to see that's what you're focused on too, is psychological safety. For me, it means well-being. I mean, well-being is what we're talking about right now. I mean, well-being is it. And if people are treated the right way, then the likelihood for them to be well is increased significantly. So for me, psychological safety means feeling like you can speak up. I mean, it's interesting when I teach classes and just in the room sometime and see that people are kind of quiet. It makes me wonder if they just feel like they could not make a mistake because they will hear about it later. So psychological safety to me means feeling safe in the environment that you're in. Being okay. Remember that book, I'm okay, you're okay? I'm dating myself now. Yeah, so that's what it means to me in a nutshell.
So, one has to wonder. My next question is a little bit about your career and professional trajectory. So, I mean, the conversation about psychological safety, psychological health and safety, psychosocial, all of these discussions are relatively new. Uh, the last probably 4 or 5 years, there's been a lot of conversation about it. So, talk to me a little bit about career wise. Where did you kind of start off, and how did you end up over having these conversations?
Okay. So you're making me go way back. You're making me go way back. I started my professional career in the corporate world was always in telecommunications. And it's interesting because as I was preparing for this conversation, I was doing a lot of reflecting, and I started in telecommunications and worked in corporate, always worked in corporate. And then I decided I really kind of want to go out into the field, right? And so I left that corporate, went into the field, which is still a corporation, but went into the field. And that's where I think I really learned the power of getting to know people for who they are, not for just what they do, right? And really decided that's the direction I like to go. And so I've had a lot of corporate experience, and then in between that, I've had a lot of entrepreneurial experience too. So I worked at one company for a while, another company, worked at companies. By that time, I had two kids who are now full grown men. So, but I had two kids, and I thought, you know what, I don't really want to keep working so much. And so my husband and I talked about it, and we agreed that I would stay home for a little while. But you know what I discovered? That didn't really work for me. I really needed to be doing something. So that's when I kind of went into my entrepreneurial phase, and I had different companies, advertising, because I was in corporate. I was involved in advertising. So advertising was always what I did. I had a direct marketing company. I had a different training company. I really liked that. I worked for a cosmetics company. I was as a sales director. So I had a lot of different. Then I went back to work at corporate again. So lots of going back and forth. What that has allowed me to do is understand where people are, whether they're in corporate and what they're going through with that. Some bosses won't listen to them, or they're trying to get promotion and they don't have clarity on the direction they need to go. And they see other people get promoted and don't know why they can't get promoted. So I understand that, and I also understand the challenges and the thrills of being an entrepreneur. So, so that's kind of my trajectory. It's been both ways. Now 6 years ago, I just celebrated my 6th year in this business full time. So that's exciting. 6 years full, just for celebrated that. So I'm excited about that. But when I think about what you're saying, inclusivity, I had a boss who there was only 3 of us in a department, and the my boss, a man, and my coworker, a woman, would at least once a week go to lunch together, and they would never ask me if I wanted to come join them. Now, way back then, I didn't know about inclusion and all that, but I did know I didn't feel like a part of the team, which is at the end of the day what inclusion is about, right? So when I think back to that, I just think, wow, that was so rude of them. Did they not think that they could at least ask me? They had to walk right by me too. So, but then on the other hand, I think of another boss that I had who really developed me and trusted me to give me projects that I didn't exactly have experience in. But so he was allowing me to contribute, part of the psychological safety, right? He allowed me to contribute and learn, and if I had screwed up on something, it was okay because we could help me and we would redo it and we would get going again. So those are two different examples of psychological safety, which all have to do with inclusion, feeling like, could you invite me to lunch? Or, just something simple like that. Or, and is bigger than that, was letting me have responsibility for a project.
Right, right. Yeah, I often I get the impression anyway, because sometimes when I talk about these topics, people's eyes kind of glaze over and they go, "He's going to talk about that, psychological stuff." And again, I am not a psychologist. I'm an occupational health and safety guy. So I look at all of this from a safety perspective. And what you described happens to lots of people. They're in either a large or a small group, but they don't feel included. People go to lunch, don't invite them. People, they're meeting on the weekend talking about whatever, and you don't get invited. You don't get included. And then, why is it that they got the promotion or the better job? Because I didn't get an opportunity. So you know, one of my observations is I was in the fire rescue service for quite a while, and I didn't drink. I still don't. I mean, I'll have a glass of wine every now and then if people tell me it's sweet, but I was never a drink. But I was never a drinker. But a lot of what went on involved drinking, so I didn't get invited out to go to the bar. I had to learn how to do that. I had to learn how to go to a bar with people who drink. I don't, but that's where they go to hang out. And it took me years to figure out, well, that's where all the conversations happening about X, Y, and Z. But again, it just didn't occur to them. I want to assume it was that they weren't just being mean to me. It just didn't occur to them to go like, hey, you can come and you can have a mocktail, or you can have, you can still hang out with us, even though the environment that the thing that we're doing, the drinking, you might not do. And all of this is really important, and from an inclusion perspective. But let's make the shift here. But that leads into people's leadership style.
Right, right. That's where the scoop is happening. Exactly.
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the Flourish DX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow Flourish DX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the Flourish DX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode.
Talk to me a little bit about inclusive leadership and how that's different from other styles of leadership.
It starts with awareness. I mean, we all we all have to take responsibility for how we treat others. I mean, we learned this so long ago when we were in kindergarten, the golden rule, we learned that, but we forget about that. And I find that when leaders, are so busy trying to handle so many different things, that they forget, I see, that they neglect to take care of the people, and the people are the ones that have to do the work. So they need to take care of the people, and little things like that boss that I talked about. I mean, I don't know if he realized he should be including me or not. I don't know if it even dawned on him, but okay, that was a long time ago. Nowadays, leaders need to know that they cannot be doing that kind of thing, because the well-being is so important and them taking responsibility is so important. So they need to be willing to change. Little things like not just including people in the meeting. So first of all, maybe there's some people who, what, they haven't attended the meeting. So you're missing out, right? So what if we invite them to the meeting? So that's the first step. Let's be aware that they're not there. People are not in the room. By the way, the room all looks the same. We could use some diversity in here. And people, kind of on another note, I find that people don't like the word diversity now, and I think that's kind of bizarre because diversity is important. But first of all, look around the room and see and think about who's on your team or who's not on your team, but who could still contribute, right? And so then inviting them to the meeting, but then sometime talk about psychological safety, they might feel like, okay, whew, I finally got invited to the meeting, but then they don't feel safe to speak up. So making them, making sure that you ask them, so and so, you've been kind of quiet, and I really value what your thought process right now. What do you think? People love hearing that word. What do you think? Right? Because they're thinking something, right? And they love being able to being asked that question. So not just inviting them to the room, but inviting them to speak. And then how about inviting them to work on a project, right? I mean, because sometimes I find that leaders are hesitant to delegate because they think, oh, I don't know if they want that extra work. But what I also find is when positioned the right way, they'll be happy to participate in a project or do some extra work because it's helping them learn. That's part of psychological safety, right? It's helping them to learn. They're feeling like, okay, I'm part of the team because they're asking for my opinion, they're asking for my input. So being aware, inviting people to speak up, and also helping them understand that it's okay to make a mistake. I would refer to this a lot when I think back to some of my better bosses. And this was really a long time ago because it was basically my first job out of college. Okay, so that's a while ago. I still remember what he said because I remember that we were in a meeting and I was like, I have a stupid question. I raised my hand and said, I kind of have a stupid question. And he said, Michelle, there is no such thing as a stupid question. The only stupid question is the one that remains unasked. And see, this was a long time ago, and I still remember that. So he was practicing psychological safety then. And that's the kind of thing that I want to encourage people to do, is leaders to do, is ask people their opinion, help them understand. We are it's true. People say we're all in it together, but act like we're all in it together, right? Act like it and let people understand that, okay, I messed up. Okay, well, guess what? I can this can be fixed. Like the world didn't end. Nobody passed away, right? So we're okay. It's all good. So being aware and including people in a project. So depending on what your job is. I was talking to somebody recently, and she has somebody who plans activities, and what she realized is that there were certain people who weren't being involved in those activities. So what that meant was that person was not being inclusive. Right? And so what we really want to do is plan activities that everyone can participate in. Otherwise, it's not a good activity. Maybe they have a limitation. We really need to be mindful of limitations that people have, and not looking at them as limitations, is looking at how to help them adapt and adjust, and helping us all connect together rather than separate you out because you can't do this or you can't do that. This reminds me of back in elementary school, where how you were dividing people up to be on teams. And it would be like, I want you to be on my team and I want you to be on a team. And if you were still standing, you were like, "Ooh, I am not included in this situation." That was me because I was not athletic. And so, I was not feeling included. But that's how it feels. It's like when you think about when you didn't feel included, it didn't feel good. So if we take a minute, if we stop and look around. Seriously, if we just look around the room, and if it's a screen, if it's a screen, look around the screen. If it's on the phone, just listen for the tonality, listen for the words. So we are talking about listening, which is critical in leadership, right? I know you know that, but that's what it makes me think about is how how it doesn't feel good when you're not included, and the flip side of that is when you are included, you feel like, "I belong to this group. This is my group. These are my people," and it makes you feel like you belong there, and therefore, it kinda goes back to the well-being, right? Goes back to the well-being.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's such an important point that you make when you talk about these experience we had when we were kids because there are a lot of things I can still recall being that kid who wasn't super athletic either. I mean, I guess I got that way eventually. I got a little bit better, but I was never the biggest kid, never the fastest kid. And I can still remember, oh, it would have been about the, oh boy, sixth or seventh grade that I went out for the park league football team and I didn't make the team. And it was one of the most devastating. I can still remember it like it was yesterday, but
Isn't
now
that something?
yeah, you can
We
still
didn't
remember how
forget
that
that.
yeah, how
Yeah.
that felt. Now, that was on the one hand. Now, on the other hand, it really, kinda created this, "That's not gonna happen to me ever again," type thing too. So I, went back home and I was kind of grousing over it and I asked my mom for, for Christmas, I want to get a set of weights for Christmas. So I'm like 11 years old. So and I can still remember her going out to Sears and get me a set of 110-pound weights. And so I was down in the basement. Could lift most of them. But but so I get out in the basement of our house and and I so basically worked out the entire off season to be prepared to go and make the team the following year. So those
That was good motivation then.
well, it was, but it probably didn't have to happen that way. There was probably another way that could have happened. For me, that's the way it happened. But did it really have to happen that way? Do people have to experience being excluded? Or can we create these environments where everything's not gonna work for everybody, but if and that's okay. That's okay. But we should be having those conversations early on. So we are gonna be doing this thing. And the one thing we all know, if we're in business, we all wanna make money, right? We all want the business to be
That's the
successful.
point of the business, yeah.
So here's the idea that I have. What do you all think about, what and if you can get people involved on the front end, then you're going to likely have more success in the back end because the activity I'm involved in is the activity I'm more invested in, you
Yeah,
know.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah,
people
absolutely.
feel included. They feel like a part of the team.
That, that,
Exactly. Yeah.
that's right. So in your conversations with people about inclusive leadership, what are some of the struggles that people say, well, that inclusive leadership is hard for me. Why? Why is inclusive leadership hard for some?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it also for me, it takes a lot of reflection, and I'm telling you, I don't want to be redundant, but self-awareness. I mean, and you know what, we both just shared experiences that we had when we felt left out. So if people stop and think about how they felt, because everyone has experienced the feeling of not belonging, and they realize that they can take responsibility for creating a different kind of culture where people do feel like they belong, then that's the first step, is just taking a look and being aware. um to be honest, in my experience, they don't really have a good reason why they're not there. They haven't found they haven't found a good reason. It's just that, yes, it takes more time. Yes, you have to be more reflective. Yes, you have to take responsibility for being more reflective and helping other people fit in. And by the way, when I was having a conversation with somebody last week and she's looking for a job, and she said, when they tell me that, I just didn't seem to fit, I said, well, here's what I want you to start asking. Based on what you see about me, what do you think I bring to you? How can I add to your culture? Right. And so she's like, yeah, you know what? That's what I'll do. So one of the things that leaders need to do is think about what assets do people already have that I can do a better job bringing out. So, on the side note, I'm a huge football fan, so I'm really happy it's football season. And so, what are you? Yeah. So, I've been hearing the coaches say, you know what? I need to do a better job coaching. Right. That's what we as leaders need to be able to do. We need to say, you know what? No, that project didn't turn out the way I want. I'm not blaming it on the team members. I'm not blaming it on other stuff. I need to do a better job either explaining what I need, bringing different people in so we can have more perspectives. I need to do a better job. So that's what I really want to encourage leaders to do is take the responsibility, have some self-ownership and say, what is it that I can do to help to be honest, help other people's life be easier, right? And help bring more satisfaction, bring more contentment to people. What can I do? So, but to answer your question, I haven't heard any good explanations about why they are not being more inclusive. Yeah. And go ahead. Go
No, go
ahead.
ahead. No, tell me
I
more.
was just gonna say, in terms of things like a lot of employees from surveys, they show that they don't have a good idea about what their next career path is, and there's always a gap. The leaders always say, "No, we talk about that kind of thing," and the employers are like, "Well, you might talk about it, but you're not giving me any specifics." So there's a gap, and so how can I make sure that I include everyone and tell everyone what they're doing well and how they can improve. Because some people get preferential treatment and other people, right? And other people don't. So again, in terms of inclusivity, it takes a lot. You know what? I know I'm telling you something you don't know. That's why leadership is hard. I mean, it takes a lot. It's not like you just go to work from 9 to 5 and you're done. You're thinking about it all the time. And you want to create an environment where people feel good. And that requires a lot of work. And you have to be willing to shift and pivot and do this. You didn't do this last time, try this time. You have to be willing to try some different things.
Right, right. Yeah, well, yeah, and you mentioned a little bit when I asked the question about why people have difficulty. What I heard is that there isn't anything specific. It just seems harder, and I think that is the obstacle. It is there seems to be this kind of natural tendency, and I think that's learned behavior. I think we've all the examples that we've seen have emphasized the person who, again, get in there, take charge, give the orders. That, and again, it's kind of a dated industrial revolution approach. So during the industrial revolution, when people came off farms, we didn't have a public education system. Uh, of course, the supervisor knew more about everything because they're probably the only person there who could read. But those days are long gone.
Long gone.
Long gone. They, well, there are people who are unhoused who have cell phones. So people have access to they don't really need to be told, minute detail. They need to, have some guidance on which direction to go, but they can figure it out. I can find that on YouTube. I don't need you to I don't
Totally.
you see what I mean? And so again, I really think it's the model itself that's the issue. It's not the people because people want to be successful. People, you know, I think most folks understand that you need other people. Otherwise, you wouldn't have hired all those people. Because if you could do it yourself, you wouldn't have hired them in the first place. And nobody hires bad people. Who puts out the shingle and says, "Oh, the worst people, the people." Nobody does. So what happens 6 months, 8 months, a year down the road, it really wasn't the people, it was the system you put the people in that was the challenge. Because it may not have been designed for them, so how do we modify it so the system can fit them not fitting the system.
Right. And we all know that the research over and over and over again for many years has continued to show us that people leave because of their manager. They leave the company because of the manager. So had they had a different manager, they might stay. And companies know how much it costs. Costs a lot of money to have to hire somebody new. But it does. But you're right. So that's why, I mean, honestly, the generations that are coming in, Gen Z, the millennials that are already in the workforce, they have different expectations than me, baby boomer, right? Or Gen Xer or Gen Xers, right? So I realize that we have standards that we have to keep, and we need to definitely have those standards. And we can also be more willing to change. I mean, we really do, because we want to make sure that we create environments, create the culture where people can succeed and where people want to stay. I mean, and I hear a lot of stories about the frustration between the baby boomers or the Gen Xers and the Gen Zers. And it's kind of funny to me, but it takes adjustments from both generations, right? But what's not going to happen is Gen Zers and millennials are not responding to barking orders. They are not. They are not. That just doesn't work anymore. And you know what? It's also, as a leader, it's hard to do that. It's hard to think that you're the only one that has all the answers, by the way. That's hard. So why wouldn't you involve other people and get their insights and perspectives? And they have different experiences, so find out how those experiences might benefit what you're working on. So if leaders will, and I have seen that, some change. If leaders will stop thinking that they have to have all the answers and that they have to be autocratic and this it's my way or the highway. No, you can't have flexibility to take your lunch hour at this time. No, you can't do that. You have to do it when I say we do it. No, you can't do that. Instead of that, how about asking some questions like, you know what? That's a different kind of request. Tell me what's making you ask that, right? I mean, they asked it for a reason. So instead of saying no, how about we take the time understanding? Then how about come to agreement on some things? It just doesn't have to be so difficult, right? It just is not, and people will feel better. A lot of times, even if you don't quote unquote get your way, you were heard. And as we learned from Stephen Covey so many years ago, people want to be heard and understood, right? So I hear you and I understand, and right now I don't think we can make that work, but I'm taking into consideration, and I'll follow up with you. And by the way, that's what leaders need to do, is they need to make sure that they follow up. They're not just speaking words to get somebody out of the way, right? But I think if leaders start to listen more and actively listen by helping people understand that they were heard and treat them like humans. I mean, that's why I said when people skills, it's all about, we're all human, and none of us are going to get everything we want all the time. None of us are, and I don't think any of us expect that either. By the way, I don't think any of us expect that. But helping people feel important, that is so important, right? That's critical. Helping people feel important, helping people feel heard.
It's really essential. It really is. And a point that you made that I'm thinking about is y- it'll actually even be safer and more comfortable for the leader if they include other people, because this learned behavior that says, to your point, I have to have all the answers, and I have to be, on 24/7, 365, and that's not healthy either. Leaders are humans too. They
And
are.
that's stressful. That's not taking care of your own well being, is it?
That's it. It's not. It's not. And again, I find that unhealthy people make it unhealthy for other people. They do. Hurt people hurt other people. So the extent to which some of that load can be lifted. Again, you started your business, company, corporation, organization, whatever it might be, with just you, but there are now 5, 10, 100, or thousands of people. Why is it that you feel that all the load is on you? It isn't, unless you take it on. It isn't. That's why you bring other people in. That's the value and the benefit of including other people, because they can also help share the load. You know. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I mean, there are it's a little easier when you're a small business or a startup to implement some of these things. But, for organizations who've been around for a while, and they're starting to recognize that, the way we've been doing things, we aren't able to retain folks and all that type of thing. And we really want to do this inclusive leadership thing. um, what are some some things that you could share about to organizations who are trying to make this shift?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. One thing is to not just rely on the same old thing. Same old thing. What happens a lot. is that companies will say to the employees who pretty much all look the same, tell your friends we have an opening. So they tell their friends who look like them. And so that's not going to bring any new perspectives, any new cultures. It's going to bring more of the same. So one thing that I really like to help people do, companies do, is find other places to look for new hires. So for example, there's associations of everything, accountants, engineers, whatever. There's associations of everything. There's also the black engineers, the Hispanic engineers, the Asian engineers, the black accountants. Anyway, my message is this: there are plenty of other places to go look. Now, you know what? It takes effort. So what I have to say is that it's going to require some effort, but anything worth doing well is worth doing, right? Anything worth doing at all is worth doing well. My grandfather used to say that. And so that means you might have to, maybe you can delegate that task to somebody in your organization to go online. Trust me, I've done it. You go online, you look for the organizations, you make it that you establish contact, you establish connection, you build relationships, you let them know when you have a position open. They start to bring you resumes of people who have positions that are open, which will bring the diversity, which will bring the perspectives. And from that, you start making people feel included. So people feel included when you involve them, like what we talked about earlier on in the conversation. But a lot of that is going to come from taking extra effort. You know what you remind me of? This reminds me of. So again, it's been a while, but I worked for the company, and um, the marketing department had been working on a project where they were putting together some new ad campaigns. They brought the managers into the department. They were super happy to be able to share with us what they were putting together. They were ready to roll it out. And so I'm sitting there looking at what they're presenting to us, and I'm seeing lots of pictures of people, but you know what? I didn't see anybody that looked like me. And I was like, am I gonna say something? Or like, this is kind of annoying because I see some people who are more mature. I see women, but I'm not seeing any black women. And so I raised my hand and I said, you know what? You guys are making a good start, but I'm not seeing anybody that looks like me. You know what? They were mortified. I mean, but here's the problem. They didn't have any diversity on their team that was putting the campaign together. So it didn't cross their mind. It didn't cross their mind, right? Because they all look the same, so they were picking people who look like them. So the so the extra effort being that goes back to being self-aware, bringing other people in. I mean, take a look around the room. We're all the same. Let's bring somebody in that doesn't look like us so they can help us have a different perspective. So that's another example of benefiting your culture by including others. And then they went back to the drawing board, and then we came back we came back together in a few weeks. And then, because they had that my perspective, they had pictures of people who look like me. I mean, they were getting ready to spend a lot of money rolling out a campaign that was going to be exclusive, right? Their campaign was not going to be inclusive and didn't make it look like they wanted people who look like me to do business with them, because that's the kind of campaign that they're rolling out. So, that's another benefit. Be inclusive about who you have in your meetings, and make sure that there's different kind of people there so you can be responsible. You don't have to know everything. They didn't think about it, but if they would have had somebody in their committee that did look different than them, they would have had that perspective. So another lesson. It went down to another lesson learned.
Yeah, therein lies the value of having you in the process at all, because even though that team didn't have it, you were there, and you felt safe enough to be able to bring it up. That's the other part that's really important, that you, for whatever reason. Yes, yeah. So, one other, I just got a couple other curiosities for you. So, my observation, again, I spent most of my working life in the public sector, which, and it was always fairly diverse. But I've noticed, kind of in the corporate side, if you look at the Fortune 500 or what have you, it isn't always as diverse when it gets to, or as inclusive when you get to the C-suite. So what does, if you were able to help or to advise an organization, what does a inclusive C-suite look like?
Mm. What our country looks like, a mix. W- Women, I mean, in my experience, a lot of times you can go on the website and you look at the pictures of the leaders. I hate to say it, most of them are white men, really, you know. So what is starting to happen now is more women are starting to get involved. So if it's possible, and all this we realize too, this can't happen overnight. Like people aren't going to be leaving a whole lot, and you're not going to have this overnight. But the big picture, the vision, 10 years from now, whatever, you would have women, you would have different ethnicities, you would have different people of different sexual orientations. Those descriptions that you had at the very beginning of the program with what about the dimensions of diversity, that's what the C-suite would look like, right? And it's not changing fast enough in my humble opinion. And a lot of it is because what I described earlier, it takes effort to go and find some people that look different. But if the company will make the acknowledgement and put forth the effort, because you know what, too, by the way, there's enough research that shows that when you have different people, a diversity in your company, your profits go up. And like you said, we're in business to make money. And it is proven that the profits increase when the diversity is there. Why? Because they have different experiences and they bring different thoughts that you might not have thought about before. Um,
Absolutely, absolutely correct. Why would you systematically exclude percentages of the population? Oh, we're all men, so we're not interested in get money from women. We're all, you know, whatever, and we don't want money from that. If it's 10%, that's a market share that we're kind of giving up on because we don't have that voice in the room. And the other thing too is even from a C-suite perspective, you know, I I I sometimes challenge the idea about how quickly it can happen because I see a lot of acquisitions, mergers, and such, and they happen like a company gets acquired. There's a new CEO and all these other people like within a few weeks. But when it comes to these kinds of issues, we. So I'm a believer that anything that is important to us will do.
right. And the other thing to add on to that, because you brought up a good point. Also, you need to represent the community you serve. And so right, you have a mixture of people in community. I mean, and people relate to people who look like them. And so when you have people who are diverse looking and have different then have some representation. I mean, we need to have representation that looks like the community. And so to your point, yeah, that is a good way to do it through acquisitions would be a way to make it happen quicker. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. So, um, tell me a bit about your book, Relearn Leadership. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, let me tell you about my book. I have it here. So, for those who are watching, Relearn Leadership. And I called it Relearn Leadership because when I wrote it last year. And after having been away from corporate for a while, and I acknowledge early on in the book, like page one, some mistakes that I made and some lessons that I learned, right? And so I just decided that I wanted to give people a tool where they could understand how they can't treat people now the way they treated them 20 years ago, right? Those principles just don't work. And so there's a bridge on the cover of the book, and I share in the book that I have the bridge is my metaphor. Long story short, I used to be afraid of bridges, crossing bridges with water, right? So I walked across the Golden Gate Bridge because I used to walk in the Avon walk for breast cancer. Now I walk in the Susan Komen breast cancer walk. So I had a fear of bridges. So I walked one time in San Francisco so I could get over that fear. And so now the bridge is my metaphor where I can help people cross the bridge from where they are to where they want to go, right? So that's my metaphor. And I divided it into three areas. One is personal leadership. I've said it plenty of times a day. It's up to us first. We can impact people more when we first work on improving ourselves. And so personal leadership, personal growth. And then the second part is called The Journey to Inclusion and Belonging. It is a journey. I mean, it is a journey because we are people, therefore we will always be changing. And it's not like we're going to get to a destination and arrive there. It's a journey, which we're and it's a process. So I talk about biases, microaggressions, and that kind of thing in that section. And then the third section is communication. Because I tell you what, David, my experience, communication is a big issue. Oh my goodness. So in there, I try and help leaders who read this book understand how to ask questions, how to become better listener, how to do a better job delivering feedback, and that kind of thing. So Relearn Leadership was written because I'm hoping that it's a tool to help people learn and grow. And I wrote it so that at the end of each chapter, there's lots of space. I mean, I want people to write in it and answer the questions there and do some reflection. I mean, uh, if we take the time to reflect, then we'll learn a lot. And so I want to encourage people to reflect and answer the questions that are in the book. So Relearn Leadership. It's available on Amazon.
Right. Absolutely. Well,
Thank
thanks
you
very
for
much.
asking me about
Oh,
that.
sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, anything you want to add? If folks want to get more information about your book, about your services, they want to, they want to hear more about what you shared. What's the best way to do that?
I would say my website, which is www.thechampgroup.com, thechampgroup.com. So hopefully that's pretty easy to remember. And on thechampgroup.com, you'll be able to find out more about me and more about the services I offered. And I have a new community that I started called Empower Her Collective. And that's designed to help women become more confident, collaborate more, and connect. So there's information on that as well as other services that I offer, like some workshops that I do and that sort of thing, uh, coaching and so forth. So I would invite you to go to my website, www.thechampgroup.com.
Absolutely. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for spending some time with me. It's been an interesting conversation. I try to, when I find folks to come chat, I'm always looking for folks I can learn something from. And the conversation about relearning is important because I think sometimes we get a lesson, and it's not that the lesson is good or bad or right or wrong. It just doesn't fit anymore. It doesn't fit anymore. And we have to kind of relearn that. I know you had a leadership class in college X number of years ago, but the world's changed. And if you want to stay contemporary and you want to keep that edge, we have to continue to learn. So, and sometimes that does mean relearning. Does mean relearning.
Yes, it does. It does. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been fun chatting with you. Yeah, I've enjoyed the conversation. I hope our listeners enjoy it as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, if you're watching or listening to this podcast for the first time, welcome. I hope something that you've heard will bring you back to a future episode. Previous episodes of the podcast can be found at psychhealthandsafetyusa.com. You can watch, like, subscribe, and share the podcast on the Flourish DX YouTube page. And please do join the Psych Health and Safety USA movement by connecting to us and becoming a subscriber on LinkedIn. So until next time, stay tuned and look out for the next episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. Tune in each week for new episodes of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. If you have a story or know of one that needs to be told, reach out to us on LinkedIn or send an email to david@id2-solutions.com or go to the Flourish DX website at flourishdx.com. We'll see you next time.